The Mafia boss was supposed to die that night, left bleeding in the mountains, phone smashed, car pushed off the road, his own blood soaking into the snow-cold dirt. It wasn't rivals who betrayed him. It wasn't the police. It was his family, the men he raised, the blood he trusted. Hours passed. The wind howled through the trees. His vision blurred. Then, footsteps. Not boots. Not weapons. A woman stood there, alone, holding a lantern, breath fogging in the cold. She should have run. Any sane person would have. Instead, she knelt beside him, pressed her scarf against his wound, and whispered the last words he expected to hear. "You're safe. I won't leave you." He didn't know her name. She didn't know who he was, but as the night swallowed the mountains, the most feared man in the underworld realized something terrifying. For the first time in his life, someone stayed, not because of power, money, or fear, but because she chose him, and that choice would change both their lives forever. Stay with me until the end, because the love that began on that mountain would force the Mafia boss to choose between revenge and redemption. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get started. The morning sun cast long shadows across the snow as Vincent Torino opened his eyes to unfamiliar wooden beams. The scent of pine and wood smoke filled his nostrils instead of the usual leather and cologne of his penthouse. His body ached in ways he'd forgotten were possible, every movement sending sharp reminders of the previous night's betrayal through his ribs. A soft humming drifted from another room, accompanied by the gentle clatter of dishes. Vincent tried to sit up, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun that wasn't there. The movement sent fire through his shoulder, and he bit back a curse that would have made his soldiers flinch. The humming stopped. Footsteps approached, light and careful. The woman from the mountain appeared in the doorway, carrying a steaming mug and wearing the kind of genuine concern that Vincent hadn't seen in years. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a thick sweater that had seen better days. She was nothing like the polished women who usually surrounded him. No designer clothes, no calculated smiles, no hidden agendas written in her eyes, just warmth and something else he couldn't quite identify. "You're awake," she said, setting the mug on a small table beside the bed. "How are you feeling?" Vincent studied her face, searching for the tells he'd learned to read in his line of work. The slight tension around the eyes that meant fear, the forced smile that hid calculation, the way people's voices changed when they recognized his name. He found none of it. "Like I've been run over by a truck," he admitted, his voice rougher than usual. "Where am I?" "My cabin," she replied, checking the bandages on his shoulder with practiced hands. "About 15 miles from where I found you. You lost a lot of blood, but nothing vital was hit. You're lucky." Lucky. Vincent almost laughed at the word. Luck had nothing to do with surviving when your own brother puts a bullet in your back and leaves you for the wolves. When the men who called you family decide your blood is worth less than their ambition. "What's your name?" he asked instead. "Elena," she said, meeting his eyes directly. "Elena Santos. And you are?" This was the moment when everything would change, when the fear would creep into her expression, when she'd realize she'd saved a monster, when she'd start calculating how to get as far away from him as possible. "Vincent," he said quietly, watching her face for any flicker of recognition. Nothing, just the same gentle concern, the same steady presence. Either she was the best actress he'd ever met, or she genuinely had no idea who he was. In Vincent's world, that was rarer than finding snow in hell. Elena moved to the window, pulling back simple cotton curtains to let in more light. The view revealed endless mountains, pristine snow, and not another soul for miles. It was the kind of isolation that would have made Vincent's security team break out in cold sweats. "You live here alone?" he asked. She nodded, still gazing out at the landscape. 3 years now. It's peaceful, quiet. Sometimes I go weeks without seeing another person. Aren't you afraid? A woman alone in the wilderness? Elena turned back to him, and for just a moment, Something flickered across her features. Something that looked almost like pain before she covered it with a small smile. "I'm more afraid of people than I am of bears or wolves," she said. "Animals are honest about their intentions." There was a story there, Vincent realized. Layers beneath her kindness that spoke of reasons for seeking solitude, for choosing mountains over mankind. He'd built an empire on reading between the lines, and Elena Santos had volumes written in the spaces she left empty. "The men who did this to you," she said, settling into a chair beside the bed. "They're not coming back, are they?" Vincent's jaw tightened. The betrayal was still fresh, still burning in his chest like acid. Marcus, his younger brother, the one he'd protected and mentored and loved like a son. Roberto, his lieutenant, who'd eaten at Vincent's table and called him family. They'd planned it perfectly, waited until he was alone, until his guard was down. "No," he said finally. "They think I'm dead." "Good." Elena's response surprised him with its firmness. "Whatever you did, whatever brought you to that mountain, nobody deserves to die alone in the cold." Vincent stared at her. In his world, mercy was weakness. Compassion was a luxury that got you killed. Yet here was this woman who'd risked her own safety to save a bleeding stranger, asking nothing in return, expecting nothing but basic human decency. It was everything his world wasn't. "Why did you help me?" he asked. "You could have kept walking, pretended you never saw me." Elena was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the worn fabric of her chair. "Because I know what it feels like to be left to die by people who were supposed to protect you," she said softly. "I know what it's like when the people you trust most become the ones you fear most." The words hit Vincent like a physical blow, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it, with the kind of understanding that only came from experience, the kind of pain that only came from betrayal. "Who hurt you?" The question escaped before he could stop it, rougher than he intended. Elena's smile was sad and distant. "Someone who said he loved me, someone who promised to protect me, someone who nearly succeeded in making me disappear entirely." Vincent felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Anger, but not the cold, calculating rage he usually felt toward enemies. This was different. Protective. Personal. "Where is he now?" "Gone," Elena said simply. "I made sure of that." The way she said it, with quiet finality, told Vincent everything he needed to know. Elena Santos wasn't just a kind woman who'd saved his life. She was a survivor who'd fought her own battles and won. "Rest," she said, standing and smoothing down her sweater. "I'll make some soup. You need to get your strength back." As she moved toward the door, Vincent called after her. "Elena." She turned back, eyebrows raised. "Thank you," he said, "for saving my life." Her smile was genuine this time, reaching her eyes. "Thank you for letting me." After she left, Vincent stared at the wooden ceiling, his mind racing despite his body's exhaustion. He'd spent 20 years building walls, creating distance, making sure no one could get close enough to hurt him. Yet this stranger had slipped past every defense without even trying. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the tracks that had led Elena to him the night before. Soon, there would be no trace of how he'd arrived at this place, this moment suspended between his old life and whatever came next. For now, he was just Vincent, not the feared Torino heir, not the man whose name could empty a room or start a war, just a wounded stranger being cared for by a woman who asked nothing more than his humanity. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time, but Vincent knew it couldn't last forever. His family thought he was dead, which meant they'd be moving quickly to consolidate power, to erase any trace of his influence, to build their empire on the foundation of his grave. They'd underestimated him before. They'd forgotten that he'd survived worse than a bullet and a mountain. They'd forgotten that mercy and weakness weren't the same thing. Soon, he'd have to choose between the safety Elena offered and the justice his betrayal demanded. But not today. Today he'd let himself be just a man, grateful for the kindness of a stranger who'd chosen to save him when the world had chosen to let him die. To let him die. The sound of Elena chopping vegetables in the kitchen became Vincent's anchor to reality. Each rhythmic thud of the knife against the cutting board reminded him that this wasn't a dream, that someone was actually taking care of him without expecting anything in return. His phone was gone, destroyed in the ambush. His men would be scattered or dead. His empire was crumbling while he lay helpless in a stranger's bed. Yet for the first time in 20 years, Vincent felt something he'd forgotten existed: peace. The soup Elena brought him was simple: chicken broth with carrots and herbs she'd grown herself. No expensive ingredients, no elaborate presentation, just warmth in a bowl. Vincent had eaten at the finest restaurants, tasted meals that cost more than most people made in a month. Nothing had ever tasted better than Elena's homemade soup. "You're a good cook," he said, genuinely meaning it. Elena settled back into her chair, her own bowl cradled in her hands. "My grandmother's recipe. She always said food made with love heals more than medicine." "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She was. Raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. Elena's voice carried the kind of matter-of-fact sadness that came from old grief, processed and accepted. "She taught me that sometimes the greatest strength comes from gentleness." Vincent paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. In his world, gentleness was a target painted on your back. Kindness was weakness exploited by enemies. Yet here was Elena, who'd survived whatever hell had driven her to these mountains, and she'd emerged with her compassion intact. "What about you?" she asked. "Any family?" The question hit like a physical blow. Vincent set down his spoon, his appetite suddenly gone. Family. The word that once meant everything now tasted like poison in his mouth. "I thought I did," he said quietly. "Turns out I was wrong." Elena studied his face, reading the pain he couldn't hide. "The men who shot you, they were family?" Vincent nodded, not trusting his voice. "Blood doesn't make family," Elena said softly. "Love does. Loyalty does. The people who stand by you when the world turns dark, those are your real family." "Then I've never had a family," Vincent admitted, the words scraping his throat raw. "You do now." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Elena said it without drama, without fanfare, as naturally as commenting on the weather. But Vincent felt it settle into his chest like a warm stone, solid and real. 3 days passed in a haze of healing and unexpected contentment. Elena would disappear for hours, returning with firewood or supplies from some hidden cache. She'd read by the fire while Vincent dozed, her presence a steady comfort he'd never experienced before. On the 4th day, he was strong enough to stand without the room spinning. Elena found him at the window, staring out at the snow-covered peaks. "Restless?" she asked. "Thinking," he replied, "about what comes next." Elena joined him at the window. The morning light caught the gold flecks in her brown eyes, and Vincent realized he'd memorized every detail of her face without meaning to. The small scar above her left eyebrow, the way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating, the genuine smile that transformed her entire expression. "You could stay," she said quietly. "There's nothing for you out there but pain and violence." Vincent's heart clenched. The offer was tempting beyond measure. To disappear into these mountains with Elena, to build something real and honest and pure, to learn what love felt like when it wasn't poisoned by power and betrayal. But the ghosts of his past wouldn't let him rest. "They killed innocent people, Elena. My men had families, children. Marcus didn't just betray me, he destroyed dozens of lives to get what he wanted. And going back will bring those people back? No, but it will stop him from killing more." Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady but sad. "I won't try to stop you, but I need you to understand something. The man I saved on that mountain, the man who's been healing in my home, he's good. He's kind. He makes terrible jokes and actually listens when I talk. That man could have a different life." She turned to face him fully, But the man you're talking about becoming again, the one who goes back to that world of violence and revenge, I'll never meet him, and I'll mourn that loss every day." Vincent felt something break open in his chest. She saw him. Not the reputation, not the fear, not the power. She saw Vincent Torino, the man, and she was willing to fight for him. "What if I told you I could end it?" he asked. "What if I could go back, handle what needs to be handled, and then return to you?" Elena's smile was heartbreakingly gentle. "Then I'd say you don't understand how that world works. It doesn't let people leave, Vincent. It consumes everything until there's nothing left of who you used to be." She was right, and he knew it. The life he'd lived, the choices he'd made, they left marks that never faded, blood on his hands that would never wash clean. But looking at Elena, seeing the hope and fear warring in her expression, Vincent made a decision that would have shocked every person who'd ever known him. "Then I don't go back," he said. Elena's eyes widened. "What? I don't go back. I stay here with you. I let Marcus have the empire. Let him think he won. We disappear. Start over. Build something new." For a moment, pure joy transformed Elena's face. Then reality crept back in, and she shook her head. "You'd regret it. Eventually, you'd resent me for keeping you from settling the score." "Elena, no, listen to me. I've seen what happens when people run from their past instead of facing it. It follows them. It poisons everything they try to build. If you don't face this, if you don't find some way to make peace with what happened, it will destroy us." Vincent stared at her, amazed. She was willing to let him go, even though it might mean losing him forever, because she loved him enough to want him to be whole, even if that wholeness didn't include her. In that moment, Vincent understood why his grandfather had always said the strongest steel was forged in the hottest fire. Elena Santos had survived her own hell and emerged not bitter or broken, but wise, strong enough to love someone completely while still being willing to let them go. "What if there was another way?" he asked slowly. "What if I could handle this without becoming the monster they expect me to be?" "What do you mean?" Vincent's mind was racing now, pieces falling into place. "My brother thinks he's won because he thinks like I used to think. All force, all intimidation. But what if the game changed? What if instead of trying to take back the empire through violence, I brought it down from the inside?" Elena's eyes sharpened with interest. "You'd destroy your own family's business? It's not my family anymore, and it's not a business. It's a cancer. But I know where the bodies are buried, Elena. I know every dirty secret, every illegal operation, every corrupt connection. I could end it all without firing a single shot. And then I come back to you. Clean slate, no empire to inherit, no enemies to fight, no past to run from. Just Vincent and Elena, building something real." Elena was quiet for a long time, her fingers tracing patterns on the frosted window glass. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "It's dangerous. If they realize what you're doing before you finish, they won't, because they think I'm dead. And even if they suspected otherwise, they'd never imagine I'd destroy everything our family built. It's the one thing they'd never see coming." "How long would it take?" Vincent considered. 6 months. Maybe less if I'm careful about it." Elena turned away from the window, her expression unreadable. Vincent's heart hammered against his ribs. Everything depended on her answer. Not just his plans for revenge, but his entire future. The possibility of love, of redemption, of becoming something more than the sum of his sins. "There's one condition," Elena said finally. "Anything. You don't do this alone. I help." Vincent's blood ran cold. "Absolutely not. Elena, these people are dangerous beyond anything you can imagine. If they find out you exist, if they connect you to me, and then we make sure they don't." Elena's voice was firm, brooking no argument. "You said it yourself. They think you're dead. But Vincent Torino's ghost is going to need allies, people they don't know about, resources they can't track. I may live in the mountains, but I wasn't always a hermit. I have skills you need. What kind of skills? Elena's smile was mysterious and slightly dangerous. The kind that kept me alive when someone very powerful wanted me dead. The kind that made him disappear without a trace when I decided I'd had enough. Vincent stared at her, seeing Elena Santos in an entirely new light. She wasn't just a kind woman who'd saved his life. She was a survivor who'd fought her own war and won. Someone who understood the cost of violence but wasn't afraid to pay it when necessary. Partners, then, he said slowly. Partners, Elena agreed, extending her hand. When Vincent shook it, he felt the calluses on her palm, the surprising strength in her grip. Whatever Elena's story was, whatever had driven her to these mountains, she was far more than she appeared. And as snow began to fall outside the cabin window, Vincent Torino made peace with a truth that would have terrified him a week ago. He was no longer the most dangerous person in the room. 2 weeks later, Elena's hands moved with surgical precision as she opened her laptop, her fingers dancing across keys that hadn't been touched in 3 years. The screen flickered to life, revealing layers of encrypted files and hidden networks that most people would never know existed. Vincent watched from across the small table, fascination and concern warring in his expression. This wasn't the gentle mountain woman who'd saved his life. This was someone else entirely. Someone who belonged in his world of shadows and secrets. Financial records first, Elena murmured, her eyes scanning lines of code. Your brother's been busy since you've been gone. 3 new shell companies, 2 offshore accounts, and 1 very interesting partnership with the Kozlov syndicate. Vincent's jaw tightened. The Kozlovs were brutal, even by his family's standards. If Marcus was working with them, innocent people were dying. More blood on his hands, even from the grave. How do you know how to do this? He asked, watching Elena navigate systems that would challenge experienced hackers. My ex-husband wasn't just abusive, she said without looking up. He was a federal prosecutor, specialized in organized crime. I learned his methods, his contacts, his weaknesses. When I finally decided to disappear him, I used everything he'd taught me against him. The casual way she said, disappear him, sent a chill down Vincent's spine. He'd killed men in anger, in business, in self-defense. But Elena spoke of it like discussing the weather. Cold, clinical, final. What happened to him? Elena's fingers paused for just a moment. Car accident. Tragic, really. Brake failure on a mountain road. These things happen when you don't maintain your vehicle properly. Vincent studied her profile in the blue glow of the computer screen. The soft curves of her face hadn't changed, but something predatory had entered her expression, something that recognized a kindred spirit in violence when necessary. You sabotaged his brakes. I created an opportunity for karma to work, Elena corrected. Richard Moss was a man who sent people to prison while running his own criminal enterprise on the side. He beat his wife, threatened witnesses, and destroyed evidence when it suited him. The world became a better place when his story ended. She pulled up another screen, this one showing financial transactions from the Torino accounts. Your brother's been liquidating assets, real estate, investments, even some of your father's collection. He's preparing for something big. Vincent leaned forward, studying the numbers. His family's empire had been built over 3 generations. To see it reduced to digital transactions on a laptop screen felt like watching his entire legacy dissolve in real time. He's planning to run, Vincent realized. Take the money and disappear before anyone realizes how much he's stolen. Not just run. Look at these purchases. Elena highlighted a series of transactions. Military-grade weapons, body armor, surveillance equipment. Your brother isn't just stealing from the family business. He's preparing for war. The pieces clicked together in Vincent's mind with horrible clarity. Marcus hadn't just wanted him dead to take control. He'd been planning a complete takeover of the city's underworld, the Kozlov partnership, the weapons purchases, the liquidated assets. It was a hostile takeover on a scale that would leave hundreds dead. We need to move faster, Vincent said, standing up so quickly his chair scraped against the wooden floor. If Marcus is planning what I think he's planning, we stick to the plan. Elena's voice cut through his rising panic like ice. Emotion gets people killed, Vincent. You taught me that, remember? In the stories you've told me about your world. She was right, and he hated that she was right. In his old life, Vincent had been the calm one, the strategist who thought 3 moves ahead, while everyone else reacted to the moment. But this was different. This was personal. Besides, Elena continued, pulling up another screen, I may have found something better than stopping your brother's war. I found a way to prevent it entirely. The new screen showed a complex web of connections, bank accounts, shell companies, and most importantly, a series of communications between Marcus and federal agents. Vincent's blood turned to ice. He's working with the FBI. Has been for months. Look at these dates. He started feeding them information about your operations 6 months before he had you killed. This wasn't just a family betrayal, Vincent. It was a federal sting operation. The betrayal cut deeper than Vincent thought possible. Not only had his brother wanted him dead, he'd been systematically destroying their entire organization from within. Every family they'd worked with, every alliance they'd built, every man who'd sworn loyalty to the Torino name. Marcus had sold them all. But how many of our people are in prison because of him? Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing arrest records with the timeline of Marcus's cooperation. 17 so far, including your cousin Tony and his entire crew. Vincent closed his eyes, seeing faces of men who'd trusted him, who'd called him boss, who died or disappeared because his brother had sold them out to save himself. The weight of their betrayal settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. There's more, Elena said softly. The FBI has been using Marcus to map the entire East Coast operation. Not just your family, but everyone connected to you. The Italians, the Irish, the Russians. They're planning a coordinated takedown that will destroy organized crime in 3 states. When? Yeah, next month. Just after Marcus finishes liquidating the remaining assets. Vincent opened his eyes, and Elena saw something there that made her lean back instinctively. Not anger. Something colder, more dangerous. Then we don't have weeks, he said quietly. We have days. Elena nodded, understanding passing between them without words. The plan they'd carefully crafted, the methodical approach they'd agreed on, all of it was gone. Now it was about survival, about stopping a war before it started, about making sure the families who'd trusted Vincent didn't pay for his brother's betrayal. What do you need from me? Elena asked. Vincent looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd saved his life, who'd shown him what love could be, who was willing to walk into hell beside him without hesitation. She deserved better than this world of violence and betrayal. She deserved peace, but she'd chosen him, and he'd chosen her. For better or worse, they were partners now, in love, in war, in whatever came next. I need you to help me save people who would have killed you without hesitation if they knew you existed, he said honestly. Elena's smile was sharp as a blade. Good thing they'll never get the chance to find out. She turned back to the laptop, her fingers already moving across the keys. Tell me about your brother's security. Habits, routines, weaknesses. If we're going to stop this, we need to think like he thinks. Vincent pulled his chair closer, their shoulders touching as they bent over the screen together. Outside, snow continued to fall on the mountain peaks, covering the world in pristine white. But inside the cabin, 2 predators planned their hunt with the patience of those who understood that the most dangerous prey was often the one that thought it had already won. Marcus always believed he was smarter than me, Vincent began. That was his first mistake. His second was thinking I was too honorable to destroy everything our family built. Elena's fingers paused over the keyboard. And his third? Vincent's smile was cold enough to freeze hell itself. Thinking he could betray me and live to enjoy it. The game was about to change. Marcus had spent months planning Vincent's death and the destruction of their world. But he'd forgotten one crucial detail. Vincent Torino had survived worse than a bullet and a mountain, and now he had something his brother had never possessed. Someone willing to burn down the world to protect the people she loved. The hunt was about to begin. Elena's fingers froze over the keyboard as a new alert flashed across the screen. Her face went pale, and Vincent immediately knew something had changed. "What is it?" he asked, leaning closer to read the encrypted message that had just appeared. "They know you're alive," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling fire. "Marcus just put out a kill order. $5 million for proof of your death." Vincent's blood turned to ice as he read the details. His brother hadn't just betrayed him once. Even from the supposed grave, Marcus was still hunting him, still trying to erase every trace of his existence. How did he find out? Elena's hands moved frantically across the keys, pulling up surveillance footage from the mountain road where she'd found him. "Someone saw me that night. A hunter with a trail camera captured me carrying you to the cabin." The grainy footage showed Elena's silhouette against the snow, Vincent's unconscious form in her arms. To anyone who knew what to look for, it was obvious he was still breathing. "The hunter sold the footage to Marcus 3 days ago," Elena continued, her voice tight with controlled fear. "He's been tracking my identity ever since. Vincent, he knows about this cabin. He knows about me." Vincent stood up so fast, the chair toppled backward. Every instinct he'd developed over 20 years in the underworld screamed danger. They'd been so focused on their plans for revenge, they'd forgotten the most basic rule of survival. Never let your enemy know where you sleep. "How long do we have?" Elena pulled up satellite imagery of the mountain roads. "The nearest approach by vehicle is 12 miles. On foot through the snow, maybe 6 hours if they know the terrain. They'll bring helicopters." "Already are." Elena pointed to a red dot moving across the screen. 2 aircraft. Military surplus. Marcus isn't taking any chances this time. Vincent's mind raced through their options. The cabin was isolated, defensible, but ultimately a trap if they stayed. They could run, but where? Elena's entire life was built around this sanctuary, and his resources were limited to whatever cash she'd managed to gather. Then Elena did something that stopped his thoughts cold. She reached under the cabin's floorboards and pulled out a military-grade weapons case. "Elena, what the hell is that?" And that's where Vincent Torino's story truly begins. Sometimes salvation comes not from the world we know, but from a stranger willing to see our humanity when everyone else sees only our sins. Love has the power to transform even the coldest hearts, to offer redemption when revenge seems like the only path forward. What would you choose? The familiar darkness of vengeance, or the uncertain light of a second chance?